Oh! Big left hand there.
Oh! I told you. Oh my God.
This might be over.
He's gonna get up.
He will not. It is over. Unbelievable performance from Vladimir Hernandez.
Welcome into ProBox TV's Deep Waters. We settled today the Hall of Fame debate as we discuss the class of 2024. But before that, have to discuss that knockout. ProBox TV delivering yet again another knockout of the year candidate. Jimmy Smith alongside Chris Algieri in studio. Paulie Malignaggi, Showtime, Sean Porter joining us via Zoom. That knockout, absolutely unbelievable. We say it all the time. It's the questions that make a fight interesting. The question is the physical pressure of Vladimir Hernandez. How would Guido Schram deal with that? Power we thought might be a factor. We didn't think it'd be that kind of factor, Chris.
Listen, I mean, it was a great back-and-forth fight, tit for tat all the way through, which we expected. We expected with these two guys, whether they match up stylistically, what they've done in the past, how they are, you know, in terms of their personality and their fight personality and boxing IQ. But man, it was a great fight until it wasn't, and then it was over. I mean, it was incredible. Incredible stoppage from a guy, Vladimir Hernandez, who's not known as a puncher. To get that kind of knockout, face down, night ender with a single shot, absolutely incredible. But that's what we expect here on ProBox TV. If it's not a fight of the year, we're going to give you knockout of the year.
Absolutely unbelievable. Paul, we were right there ringside, and it's one of those things where we knew about the pressure of Hernandez, and it was there throughout the fight. But it was right when we thought maybe he's slowing down a little bit. It's round 6. His activity level was going down at the end of round 5. It kind of came out of nowhere, which made it that much better. What were your thoughts seeing it live, Paulie?
Yeah, I'm looking at the replay right now, and I'm looking at even the crowd reaction. Everybody was in total shock with that KO. It came out of nowhere. And you know what's funny about what we've been doing at ProBox TV? We've been every time we have a show, there's at least one just absolutely smoking fight, sometimes more, but there's at least one of our fights on that night. There's upsets, there's just fight of the year candidates. And I keep telling myself, you know, how many in a row are we going to run off like this? There's got to be some bad shows here.
Yeah, when is this going to run out?
Yeah, even if on paper we do our best to make them like this every single time, sometimes how it winds up in reality is not the same on paper. And I thought last night might have been an opportunity for that to happen because you had some clashing styles, but Schramm is a bit of a mover. And there was the opportunity, I thought, there for Hernandez to possibly get his feet caught in the mud a little bit if Schramm was able to move adequately. And instead, I mean, it started out fast from round 1. It's almost as if Schramm decided, I'm not going to be able to move for all 10 rounds. Let me try to hurt this guy first and then get on the move so that I can at least first slow him down. And I said something during the fight last night. I said, Schramm's a mover, but when you're a mover and you've got to literally fight a guy off of you, and Sean actually mentioned our fight against my fight against you. I said, when you've got to literally fight a guy off of you, instead of being able to box smoothly off that move, when you got to load your punches up, and you're not the kind of guy that loads your punches up, it throws off your entire timing because you're not a guy who stops and shoots hard and then moves again. You're a guy who moves off the move and fires rapid fire and fires in rhythm with that movement. I noticed Schramm from the beginning was moving, but then he was stopping to throw hard shots and hard shots and hard shots. And it's unlike his style. You know, he's a mover, shooter, mover, shooter, mover, shooter. But then it's, you know, it's got to come off the rhythm of the movement. So when you stop and just like really load up, it doesn't go with that rhythm. And it's going to make you defensively susceptible. And to tell you the truth, I didn't expect the knockout of the year candidate for sure. I mean, I don't think any of us did. We expected a good fight. We hoped for a good fight. But because he's loading up, even in this last shot, he's slowing down here. Obviously, it's technical fundamentally unsound because he's going to move with the right hand down, and he's going to walk into that left hand. But when the knockout comes, I'm like, I'm talking over these highlights, and it's not coming, but whatever.
Yeah, okay. You're on round 2, so keep going.
It'll get to round 6. But either way, he throws a little double right hand, and he tries to throw a whipping hard left hook. Again, it's away from the rhythm. It's not with the speed. He's trying to push out a big shot, and he never sees Hernandez's left hand coming, which is from the southpaw stance, and he throws it looping. So you got to at least cover yourself fundamentally when you make that move by keeping your right hand up, and he doesn't do that either. So he goes into the left hand, while he's looking at a target that he's throwing at, and he gets hit and he never lands his shot. So it's a shot he doesn't see coming. It's a shot he walks into, and it's a shot that he's fully focused on his own on what he's throwing, so he never sees what's coming back at him.
Well, Chip, we were talking about that night too. You know, to piggyback off what you're saying, you know, Schram, when he's loading up with those shots and he's trying to hit hard, it does two things. One, it makes you more tired. And we mentioned yesterday that your resilience, your chin goes down as you get more tired. But also, he was losing position. He got very tall on that shot, basically knocking himself out. He ran right into the shot, got super tall, lost the position, wasn't dropping his butt anymore for the power punch, and ran headlong into that shot with a guy who's not normally a puncher, but he's a position fighter, is Hernandez. He had his feet underneath him, put the shot where it was there, and Schram ran into it. Chin up in the air, very, very tall, legs not underneath him, and knocked himself out.
Showtime, I got to ask you, is this the kind of fight you look at and you go, this is what you tell guys? I don't care if your opponent is a big puncher. I don't care if it's a blue-collar volume guy. Keep that damn hand up because this can happen at any time. It's what makes boxing boxing.
Absolutely. You know, I'm looking at Vladimir's box rec right now, and I'm looking at, because I know he had quite a few losses. I'm looking at the names.
Yeah.
Everything about this guy is deceptive. That's the number one. That should be his ring name, okay? Because everything about him is deceptive. Even when you look at the losses, you look at Guido coming to the but you look at Guido coming into this fight. He lacks speed. He doesn't have good foot movement. He as you can see, deceptive power. We know that he's got a motor, but we know what we should do. We should move on him. We should be able to pot shot him, pick him apart. But they don't come into the ring with that game plan. They come into the ring with the game plan of trying to hurt him and stop him, opposed to just doing what they should do. And what I take from that is the fact that you got to be special in order to beat somebody like Vladimir Hernandez, because his deceptive speed, his rhythm, all these weird things that he does is, you know, he boxes a little out of position. It will get you get caught in the mud, like Paulie just said. You get caught in the mud. You get caught trying to do some of the things that he does. You get caught up. It gets into your psyche, and then you end up not performing the way that you can. And then also just pretending to the knockout. That was a cumulative of punches through the course of 6 rounds. That was one big punch at that moment. But that was something that was built time after time, round after round, and that's what Hernandez does.
Pressure bust pipes. Pressure bust pipes.
Exactly. So when we see this big punch right here, this was a cumulative of round after round of him just doing what he does. That pressure, going to the body, going to the head, hitting the shoulders, all of these other things. And Guido can't get up. He's worn out. He's wore out. And on top of that, with Paulie, what you said, he tried to do something that he's not used to doing, and that took a lot out of him too. So, you know, you got the deceptive.
And typically, when you try something you're not used to doing, it doesn't work. Typically, you know what I mean. And what he's trying to do when you fight a guy, because I was a non-puncher, right? I wasn't a big puncher. When you fight a guy who's going to bring you a lot of pressure, you already put in your mind, okay, this guy's going to be chasing me the whole fight. He's going to be bringing it the whole fight. My position game has to be strong so that I can shoot no matter what step I make. And if I find myself getting put in bad positions to where then I have to fight you off, that's not going to work for me, man, because that's not my style. And that's what Schramm ended up doing there, too. It's almost like he didn't mentally prepare for the pressure, or he thought maybe if he loaded up, he thought maybe if he started loading up, he would stop him, and that wasn't going to happen. He didn't stop the pressure from still coming to him. So now you get frustrated, because what happens? Now the guy's not still coming at you. You've just changed your game plan around it, trying to hurt him. You still can't hurt him because that's not who you are. And now you're doubly frustrated because you're trying something you didn't try. It's not working. Now you're not in rhythm for what you normally do. You're thrown all over the place, and it's Vladimir Hernandez personified. That's why
we said it. Both these guys are not having trouble fighting each other early. But essentially what you're saying, Champ, is it came down to the guy who fought his fight. Vladimir was fighting the way that Vladimir fights. Schramm wasn't. And that ultimately was the difference.
Yeah, I always like to say.
Vladimir forced Schramm to fight his fight.
Exactly. And I always like to say you have to be both willing and able. We know that Guido was able to move, able to box, able to use his speed, but was he willing to? And usually, in order to become a champion, you have to be both willing to do what it takes and able to do what it takes. That guy that isn't connected mentally, emotionally to the fight, that's the one that wavers and the one that loses.
Well, before we go to a break, I have to say one thing. Looking back on that number one, the heart of Schram getting up, trying to get up after a face-down knockout, that is difficult to do. Number two, referee gave him every opportunity. I thought it was a great job by the referee. A lot of face-down KOs, they wave it off, it's over. He counted, gave him a chance, he stumbled, called it off. That's exactly what a referee is supposed to do.
Especially when they make a three-point landing like that.
That is almost always they wave it off. Good job by the referee. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, that wasn't our only KO of the year candidate. How about some fights of the year? We break them all down, what you've seen on ProBox TV when we come back.
June 28th, live from the Entertainment and Sports Arena in Washington, D.C., WBA Super Featherweight World Champion Lamont Roach Jr. will defend his title against undefeated challenger, fearless Fergal McCrory of Ireland. Catch all the action live in Washington, D.C. on ProBox TV, or even better, download the ProBox TV app.
WBA Super Featherweight Championship on the line. Lamont Roach Jr., Fergal McCrory, he was ringside with us last night. Not only is he a great commentator, great personality, his desire to get in there and do what we saw, a huge knockout in front of a raucous crowd, that is his goal. Can he pull it off June 28th? That's the question. Going to be a great fight in Washington, D.C., a homecoming for the champion. Now, let's get back to what's been going on. ProBox TV. You know, we saw, of course, Vladimir Hernandez, amazing knockout against Guido Schram Wednesday night, but it's not the first. When you look at what we've had coming up and what we've seen on ProBox, it isn't just the matchups, but the way they have ended. Some knockout of the year candidates. That's right, Terrence Williams versus Jonathan Sosa. This was on May 8th. Chris, this was a scary one that we saw. Beautiful shot, stiff knockout.
Yeah, you see Sosa there on the floor, stiff as a board, arms out in a stretch out position, no control of his body at that point. And, you know, Williams, it was still his first round. You know, he got in there. He was fundamentally very, very solid, going in, doubling up that left hook, going high, low, and then eventually we made that adjustment, and he goes high, high. He lands the left hook upstairs, comes back with another left hook that puts him flat on his back and stiff as a board. You know, there was a moment there where he got hit behind the head. He was complaining about that. People were trying to say that might have had something to do with how bad the knockout was, because he had already been hit behind the head. But I mean, you see the proof is in the pudding there. Boom. I mean, double left hook, perfect shot, right on the money. No need for a count. I mean, there's no chance this man was getting up in 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 at that point.
Multiple hooks. We call it Roy Jones and somebody, right?
Doubling up that left hand.
Hitting up
same
with
side,
the left hand over and over. Beautiful stuff a la Roy Jones Jr. But not just that. Jonathan Orozco, Adam Lopez in a fight that was an incredible contrast in styles. It was aggressive. It was back and forth. It was the contrast in how they fought that night. Paulie, you were there with us ringside. Incredible fight, incredibly back and forth. What is it with these fights we get on ProBox TV? To you, what's the secret sauce to wars like this?
Oh, we call them smock-worthy, right? Well, we have to put out the smock so we don't get full of blood. And this was one of those smock-worthy fights. I mean, the trick is just the matchmaking. You know, obviously, Gary Jonas, who runs ProBox, demands the best of the from the matchmaking. He's hands-on with the matchmaking himself. He wants the best possible matches made stylistically, and not just with records, but also with substance behind those records. And then he wants to match up against each other because he knows that this is what fans want, and this is what will keep fans coming back. And this is really, in reality, what's missing from boxing is the best evenly matched kind of fights, even at the highest level a lot of times. So, you know, we're doing it here at ProBox TV, and Cardoso against Lopez was one of these fights. And it's certainly not the first. It won't be the last, but it was one of our, it was only in the last couple of weeks that we had this one. This was just back and forth. I mean, this was just anytime you thought one of these guys was slowing down, the other one would pick up, and then all of a sudden the roles would reverse again. Lopez was trying to use that movement and throw those punches in bunches. Cardoso kept trying to bring that pressure. Solid hands and combinations from Cardoso, just missing a lot of the head movement. You know, these guys were good enough to be on this level, but flawed enough to make it super exciting. And that's really what they did. They made it very, very exciting, and neither guy wanted to give an inch. And it turned out to be one of our better fights so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was super high-level stuff, too. These guys are world-class, and it would show that. Adam Lopez has been there. He's been in with world champions. He's been competitive with these guys. Hasn't really gotten that big signature win yet, but he's still a young guy trying to get. And then Cardoso, I talked to him actually last night. He was at the fights last night, and we were speaking before the show, and he's like, I want to be a world champion. I'm ready. What'd you think of the fight? Well, I said, you look like you got the goods, man. You got to keep it up. You got to keep getting wins like that. So it wasn't just them putting on heart. It was a ton of skill as well.
Showtime, what do you think of that when we talk about the level of the hunger of guys that are right there? They just one signature win when you put them in together and you get magic. Is it because of that hunger? What do you think of that?
Well, you know what? ProBox TV reminds me of when we used to fight out there in California, in the LA area at the Home Depot Center. It had a reputation.
Yeah.
There was this reputation that whenever you fought out there, every single fight was a banger, great electric fights. I remember the first time that I fought out there, they told me, hey, this is the reputation here in interviews. This is the reputation here. You're gonna continue the legacy of what's going on here. And it was like, it felt like it was a demand, you know. I think I had 2, if not 3 fights over there, and then a handful of fights that I had commentated over there. Every single fight at the Home Depot Center, I know they've changed the name now quite a few times, but every single fight was amazing. And it seems like that's what's going on now with ProBox TV. I'm sure fighters are being told, hey, this is what they're doing down there. This is what you can expect. This is the kind of output you got to have. And that's why now the fights they're going to continue to deliver, because now that's the reputation of ProBox TV.
No runners, no holders here at ProBox TV. You know what you're coming in for.
Well, speaking of no runners, no holders, Robbie Davies versus Sergey Lipinets. This was one of those where, I hate to say it, we like both guys.
Yeah.
Right? Both guys came in there with that must-win, I cannot lose this fight kind of attitude. Both humble, both respectful. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. It's one of those, you hate to see somebody lose because the fight was so good.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, if they both lost and won that night, because they both left a lot in the ring. They damaged each other quite a bit. And they both won because they put on an epic fight that is going to be talked about for a very, very long time. Potentially going to be the fight of the year. And this is a little bit different than the Adam Lopez and Cardoza fight, because these guys are much older, much longer in the tooth. They've been around. They've been at the top of. Sergey Lipinets is a former world champion. Yeah. You know, he's back on he's trying to get back to that position. He's already been there, unlike a lot of these other guys. And then Robbie is one of those guys who's just fallen short. Never had that big signature win, never got a world title, has been in with world-class guys, but could never get over the hump. This was his opportunity to get himself back into those positions, give himself another chance to potentially be a world champion, and to put on an all-time classic. These guys, it was back and forth. We as commentators are on edge of our seat all night long. There was blood all over us. There was blood all over the ring. The first couple rows had blood on them. This was my favorite fight of the year. If this is not fight of the year, if this is not a fight of the year candidate or the fight of the year itself in terms of all of boxing, people need to open their eyes. This fight
Or it's been a great year.
Phenomenal. Or that too.
Or we get
if this fight gets beat out for fight of the year, then we've had an awesome year.
Yeah. Paulie, you were right there once again, but the fact that both guys were hurt, both guys had to dig deep, both guys had to find that thing within themselves to be great. Yeah. That was the story of the fight to me.
It was first of all another smock-worthy fight, and you know, if not for these smocks, the dry cleaning bills go up, right?
Well, this was the inception of the smock. I was done. I was done paying for dry cleaning at this point.
This was the we've had enough.
Yes.
It wasn't the first one, but
the straw that broke the camel's back.
We need smocks for these ringside fights. But also, the momentum switches in this fight were crazy. I mean, it was one guy had the advantage, hurting him, and it looked like it was over. And the other guy comes back and actually hurts the other one, and then, you know, certainly turns it back around. It was back and forth action where both guys at one time or another were on the brink of being gone and had to fight through it. Really, really great moment. The kind of fight where you have that kind of roller coaster of emotions for ourselves watching it and calling it, for the fans at home watching it, and of course for the fighters themselves to go through it. It really was a fight that, you know, you crave to see every time the bell rings when you watch boxing.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the fighters that gave us those moments over and over, the ones that are Hall of Fame worthy. We have our inductees for 2024, but do we agree? We'll break them down when we come back. Welcome back into Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. We're discussing the Hall of Fame and the inductees of 2024. Do we feel they deserve it? Well, first one, Ricky Hatton. I won't sing the song. It'll be in your head. It'll be in everybody's head for a year. But one guy who had his own song. Ricky Hatton, of course, his list of victories. Costa Zoo really put him on the map. Jose Luis Castillo, that was a classic. And then, unfortunately, our own Paulie Malignaggi. I got to start with you, Paulie. What are your thoughts on his legacy? Do you think Ricky Hatton is Hall of Fame worthy?
I think based on what Ricky has not only accomplished, but also what he did for boxing, what he did for British boxing and world boxing, I think it's safe to say, I would dare to say that there are a lot of people today who are boxing fans because of Ricky Hatton that weren't boxing fans before. I think Ricky brought a lot of people to our sport, especially in the UK, but then, of course, out of curiosity, also outside of the UK. Solid career, on the come up, gained a lot of popularity, was WBU champion, I think, for a while before winning the major strap, the IBF title against Kasha Zhu. And then, was always in entertaining fights. Had some title defenses, obviously won against me as well. Only lost to the very, very best of the sport. And then, I feel like there's more reasons to put Ricky than not. I know there's also debates about not putting him in there, but I feel like when a guy has done so much for the sport and also accomplished championships, I feel like it's necessary that a person like that gets into Hall of Fame, especially that I've seen, sort of the some of the names that get into the Hall of Fame, you're kind of questionable at times. So when you see some of the other names and you look at what Ricky did, and Ricky did for his own career, for boxing, for Manchester, for England, I'd say he was definitely worthy. I just wish he hadn't picked Sinchenko to come back again so that I could have fought him in the rematch. That was my only gripe. He chose Sinchenko at welterweight, and he got beat.
Yeah, so Showtime, when you look at his losses, really in his prime, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather Jr., the best of that era. But Floyd Mayweather said it. He goes, great wrestler, not a great boxer, right? And then he's physical, he gets in and he mauls you a little bit, but not as technical as a lot of guys of that era. Do you think that counts against him? What do you think of his credentials?
No, I don't think it counts against him. I think I knew about 50% of what Paulie just said. Paulie gave me about another 50%. I'm like, this guy's a Hall of Famer. He's been to the top. He's won at the top. He's also lost at the top. I don't think his style in terms of how much of a boxer or not a boxer he is, how much that determines whether or not he goes into the Hall of Fame. The bottom line is, like Paulie just said, he put asses in the seats. He entertained people. That was the one thing you knew whenever Ricky Hatton was getting in the ring, was that you were going to be entertained. Non-stop, aggressive kind of attitude, had a little bounce, had some flair, reminds me a lot of my career. You know what I mean? And I had less fights than he had, and people are telling me that I'm going into the Hall of Fame. So thank you, Ricky, for making it to the Hall of Fame. You give me hope. You give me hope.
Yeah, but what's
you
your
got results? You got results, right? When you got to get the results.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you guys some pushback. I want to give you guys some pushback on this one. Listen, I love Ricky Hatton too. I enjoyed his career thoroughly. I remember watching all those fights on the way up. And yes, with WBO, he defended that title God knows how many times. But
WBA won that against Collazo.
Collazo with a very, very close fight. Yep. Collazo fought very well, and that was him at 47. Hatton was not the same fighter at 47. He moved up for the opportunity to fight Collazo to get that title. Very, very tough fight. Went back down to 140, I believe, after that. And he got KO'd by...
Pacquiao beat him at 40.
Pacquiao beat him at 40. KO'd at welterweight.
Mayweather stopped him at 47.
Yeah, right, at 47. And then I believe he went back down to 40 after that. And then Pacquiao stopped him.
stopped him at 47.
And then he went back up to 47. So he went back and forth. The majority of his good work was done at 140. He had that one title fight against Collazo at 47. But also, you got to look at, what kind of fighter what kind of athlete he was. Because he had a train behind him. And the fan base was insane. So a lot of this comes down to how liked he was. He's a very likable guy, fun style. Everything that we all know about Ricky Hatton. Hey, Ricky Hatton. All that.
There's only one, right?
Had to get it out there. Stuck in my head, too.
I love he hears it when he goes to bed, by the way.
There's only one Ricky Hatton, not hey Ricky Hatton. There's only one Ricky Hatton.
And, he had that great double left hook head body, which is one of my favorite combinations as well. I remember watching that a lot. The head body head, kind of like the Mickey Ward combination. But listen, Costa Tszyu was by and far the best fight he had of his career. Yep. And he mugged him. I mean, it was a lot of head behind the head, like you mentioned, the wrestling that Floyd Mayweather said. Very, very ugly fight, and it was on his turf. He made that fight very, very ugly and was obviously successful. But I don't know, man. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback, at least from guys like me, about whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame or not. It's not a likability. It's not a likability contest. I know,
yes,
Sean.
It is.
Sean, you're likable too. I know you're likable too. Come on. But objectively, I'm going to argue that Paulie you had a better career than Ricky Hatton. You were a two-time world champion, two-division world champion. You had more success at 47 than he did. But yes, he beat you. But okay. But he beat you at a time when you had a poor performance. You had some issues with your camp. We've talked about this at length. And I'm just thinking about what you were able to do and the number of guys that you fought versus how many guys that he fought. He didn't fight that many great fighters. And what he did with the guys that he did get in with, Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather were 2 highlight reel knockout losses. I mean, highlight reel knockout losses. Bad. And Costa Zoo, not a great looking fight, but a great win nonetheless. Collazo, very, very close fight. Also Collazo wasn't in his prime at that time, so I don't know, man. I think there's definitely some pushback from certain people, me being one of them.
Well, it's about the emotional side of deciding who should be in the Hall of Fame. That's what we're going to touch on with our next one. That's right. When we come back, Diego Chico Corrales. Should he be in the Hall of Fame? We'll discuss it right after this. Welcome back into Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. We're discussing the Hall of Fame 2024 class. What do you think of it? Who deserves it? Who doesn't? I'm joined by Chris Algier here in studio. Joining us via Zoom, Showtime Sean Porter, Paulie Malignaggi. All right, we just discussed Ricky Hatton and his credentials. What about Diego Chico Corrales? Now, when you talk about all-time great fights, his wars with Jose Luis Castillo, especially the first one, is one of those, if I may say it, where Chris, is there a certain guilt almost watching that fight? Like, I love boxing. It's one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen. It could have been stopped arguably 3 times at certain points before the end. You love it. You hate it. It's amazing. It's brutal. It's beautiful. It's one of those fights.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I put that on the level of, like, Barrera Morales 1. Yeah. Like, at the highest level war you're ever going to get. I mean, because both these guys are fantastic fighters. And for them to go tit for tat the way they did, I mean, hurting each other, big power from both men, and be able to hurt each other throughout. I mean, the drama. It was like watching a play. It was insane, that fight. And that goes down in history for me. And yeah, do I feel bad watching it? No, because I don't feel like I'm watching 2 humans fight. Yeah, I feel like I'm watching 2 gods meet in the clouds fighting each other with lightning bolts. I mean, it's that kind of epic amount of fight. I mean, absolutely incredible. Corrales, one of my favorite fighters for a very long time. I remember watching him when he knocked out Robert Garcia, 32-0 at the time. I mean, just blasted him out. Did the same thing to Acelino Freitas. Acelino Freitas was a hell of a fighter, man. Coming up from Brazil, knocked everybody out. I think he had 100% KO percentage.
Angel Man Freddy knocked him out as well.
Angel Man Freddy, very, very solid guy. Had nothing for Chico. Nothing. So I mean, what he was able to do with those kinds of guys. Obviously, we know the Floyd Mayweather fight, which is one of my favorite fights, and that was what really turned me on. Actually, I knew about Floyd before that, but that one I was like, wow, this guy is something special because he completely dismantled Chico and put on an absolutely virtuoso performance. Maybe one of the best career moments for Floyd Mayweather in terms of performance-wise. But yeah, no, Corrales is just one of those guys, man. He was special. His career ended badly, very, very badly. Moving up in weight, wasn't able to make weight at certain times. Obviously had his out of the ring troubles, and then obviously tragically, died. But way too soon. But one of those guys, man, that he gave himself every fight. Left a lot in the ring, and I don't think would have done it any other way.
Showtime, I remember the Floyd Mayweather fight, it getting stopped. He was knocked down, I want to say 5 times in that fight, and just going off on his corner for stopping the fight.
On his stepfather.
It went off on his stepfather. I mean, they had to be physically separated. That's how much heart this guy had. What are your thoughts on him and his Hall of Fame credentials?
Yeah, I had just gotten connected to Corrales, I think right around that time that he had that fight with Mayweather. I didn't know much about him prior to fight Mayweather. And I remember having a conversation with his stepdad about him stopping the fight. And he said, sometimes you have to protect fighters from themselves. They don't understand where they're truly in harm's way, not for that night, but for years and years beyond. And I think that was one of those nights where we really see a great individual who's built to do this. But we see that someone is just as capable, more capable, but also built for this, and how 2 robots, when they meet in the center of the ring and one is just built better than the other, there's nothing that this guy can do about it except for continue to get up. I think that moment right there, when you talk about him being a Hall of Famer, we see the wins and the losses, but that moment right there, even though it was a loss, that's one of those losses that kind of makes you say, hey, the way he fought through that we wish other fighters would fight like that, he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Paulie, if you stop his career at the Jose Luis Castillo win, he is 40-2. He doesn't go off on those 3 losses. It's hard not to see how that fight took everything out of him. He was never the same guy after those fights. If you think his career stops there, are we even having this debate at all? It stops at 42 after Jose Luis Castillo.
Possibly not. I'll tell you what, I think both of those guys, if you look at what they did after they were ruined, I mean, that was almost a guarantee that they were going to be ruined. And if you look at the results afterwards, I remember thinking to myself, these guys are ruined after this. They're not going to be the same. And they really weren't. Yeah, a lot of people talk about the Mayweather fight because it was sort of Mayweather's coming out party. Mayweather was already a very good fighter, but going into the Mayweather fight, Corrales had been very, very destructive. So there was very, very close odds going into that fight. And a lot of people were picking Floyd to lose the fight, and so that goes to show you the kind of level people were looking at Corrales at that moment. Sort of brought him down a little bit, but it didn't discourage him at all. He came back, won more world championships. I remember, the highlight reel knockouts continued, and even when he lost, it was always a fight, man. I mean, this guy wasn't just gonna let you beat him. I mean, I remember the Casamayor fight where the guy's got a hole in his mouth and he's yelling at Margaret Goodman to let him continue. And Margaret Goodman who is a real ringside doctor, unlike the ringside doctor Tim Tszyu had told him, no, you're not gonna fight. You're gonna get stopped, and that's it. And Diego was flipping just like he was flipping in the Mayweather fight on his stepfather, So he was like, no.
And came back to win the rematch against Casamayor.
Yeah, and you're like, dude, there's a hole underneath your lip, dude. Like, get this guy a mirror. Like, there's a hole.
He's a warrior. Warriors don't worry about mirrors.
But yeah, that's the kind of guy he was, man. I mean, and he wore it on his sleeve, and really he was an amazing fighter to cheer for, to root for, and to watch. You knew you were going to get you entertained. And also, again, like Hatton, he achieved. He won championships. He achieved, and he beat some good fighters, Castillo and Casamayor being a couple of them. And, also the ones that Chris mentioned at 130 pounds. Really, those were good fights. Took the IBF title from a very underrated Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia today is known to be as a solid trainer, but he was actually a very solid world champion. And Corrales blitzed him with that punching power at 130 pounds. I got a funny story. I can remember going to the 2000 National PAL tournament, and Corrales versus Mayweather was happening in January 2001. And this was in 2000. I can remember somebody pointing out Diego Corrales' half brother. His name was, I think it was Darrell Woods. His name Woods was his stepfather's name, if I remember correctly, last name. Yeah. So, and somebody pointed him out. So I was like, oh man, okay. And then a couple of days later, I'm having a conversation with him, and I guess he doesn't know that now I know that he's related to Diego. And he's like, so who you got in that fight, Floyd Mayweather or Diego Corrales? And I'm thinking in my mind, mofo, I know you're related to Diego. I'm not going to say.
So not taking the bait.
But he didn't know that I knew, because nobody knows unless you knew. Nobody knew he was related to him, So I was like, yeah, Diego got a shot, man. He's a big puncher, But in my mind, I'm like, damn, I like Floyd though,
Floyd would eat you alive. Oh, there's more debate to come. The class of 2024 with a heavyweight who may have done his best work at light heavyweight, Michael Moore. When we come back. Welcome back into Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. We're discussing the Hall of Fame class of 2024. Now, as a child of the 90s, I got to say I like this one. We'll discuss his merits. Michael Moore, part of the, Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson years of the mid-90s as a heavyweight. That's going to be an important caveat. I got to reveal some behind the scenes. Chris, when you and I were first talking about Michael Moore, you were like,
I was like, no.
You were like, no. But my argument, of course, of that class of the 90s, of heavyweights, right? I just went over a few, but, Riddick Bowe, Tyson, Lewis, of all of those, you kind of put Michael Moore at the bottom. Great class of heavyweights, but he's kind of at the bottom. But there's extra here, Chris. Want to tell me?
All right, so I gotta go to the book now. So I took some notes because I started looking at what he did at light heavyweight. So 10 world title fights at light heavyweight, 10 KOs. 10-0, 10 KOs at light heavyweight. Whoa. Goes up to heavyweight, wins a world title by KO. Where's my notes here? And then he
won the world title by decision against Holyfield, no?
Holyfield was decision.
Yes, Holyfield was the decision, but he
knocked out both for the IBF title.
Cooper too. Cooper. The Cooper fight was for a world title. He knocked him out. That was his first world title. I think he had 3 or 4 world titles at heavyweight. World title fights, 15 wins, 2 losses. I mean, and he had 12 KOs in those 15 wins at world title fights. That's a lengthy resume. 9 defenses light heavyweight title, 7 fights at heavyweight in world title fights. He beat Evander Holyfield. There's a good argument, man. The guy accomplished a lot. Objectively, did a lot for the sport.
Emmanuel Stewart called him the best light heavyweight in the world, maybe the greatest of all time. Paulie, should we judge that a little more than, as I said, in the heavyweight class? I kind of put him at the bottom of that '90s class. Does that hurt him? What's your thought about this today?
I mean, he wasn't the heavyweight that started as a heavyweight. He was sort of kind of graduated to heavyweight division, but he's more famous as a heavyweight. He's very known as a heavyweight. So a lot of time it slips people's mind the damage he did at light heavyweight. And you see the small facts. Random people are born in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is just greatness. I mean, Michael Jordan's born in Brooklyn. Michael Moore is born in Brooklyn. Randomly, everybody's born in Brooklyn somehow. But Al Capone's born in Brooklyn. Anyway, going back, but
ancestors from Ohio though.
Yeah. So. Right. But nonetheless, I feel like when you combine it all together, you make a very good case for Moore. And also, those heavyweight fights in the 90s, he was in a heavyweight division in the 90s that was very, very good to navigate. You know what I mean? So to win world championships in the light heavyweight in the heavyweight division of the 90s, and to do it after coming up from the light heavyweight division, it sort of it multiplies the effect more for me, and that's why I don't mind Moore getting in the Hall of Fame. He's really, when you take a closer look under the microscope, there's a lot you realize that is unappreciated about Michael Moore that maybe isn't realized at first glance, and that's probably why some people may not know as much. It's also, he had a bad chin at heavyweight. Well, now that explains it. Once you realize he was a light heavyweight, it explains why he didn't have a great chin at heavyweight. He wasn't.
So, Champ, remember, this is light heavyweight we're talking about. He's not a cruiserweight moving up. Like Evander Holyfield was a cruiserweight. There's a whole weight class in between light heavy and heavy. He jumped that, went to heavyweight. So we got to keep that in mind too.
Showtime. Go ahead.
No, that's what I'm saying. So when you look at it, he had a bad chin. Dude, I mean, he's a light heavyweight getting hit by heavyweights. I mean, when he got hit, he got knocked out, but he also knocked
them out too.
That punch and power still carried well into the heavyweight division.
Showtime, when you look at it, the problem is a lot of people remember he's a story of George Foreman knocking him out at 45 years old. Is that a problem that when I say Michael Moore, you go, the guy George Foreman knocked out to win the world title at 45 years old? Does that hurt his legacy? It sucks. Is that what people think about?
Well, listen, when we talk about Hall of Fame, we have to talk about your entire career. We can't talk about a moment, a fight, a day in time. We have to talk about top to bottom. We just talked about Mildred Taylor, and Chris mentioned him winning the gold medal in the Olympic Games. I think that the entirety of you as a fighter should be considered when we talk about you being in the Hall of Fame, not just what you did as a pro. Some fighters, we're going to talk about their amateur pedigree, and then we're going to also talk about their professional pedigree as well. So Michael Moore, he fits the bill to me, and I really want to exit this conversation because if the day comes that I'm in the Hall, I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame, I don't want people asking whether or not I'm supposed to go into the Hall of Fame and talking about top to bottom my career and why I go in, why I don't go in. You guys are assholes for making me talk about this. I'm really concerned about myself.
Sean, just play it positive all the way. That's it. Just play everybody.
Yeah, they all deserve to get in.
Sean, tell everybody they're in. Everybody's in.
Yeah, they all deserve to get in.
Showtime. When your time comes, we will have the debate on the show, and we'll be super duper.
Sean,
I'm gonna sit right here.
When Sean gets in, we gotta go up there when he gets inducted.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We're definitely doing it.
One quick point about the George
Sean
Foreman
on Zoom.
Sean's got to
live instead of Sean on Zoom because then we'll all be up there.
Do a live show. Real quick about the George Foreman thing. Up until he got knocked out, he was whooping George's ass. Let's just
having the fight of his life.
Keep that
up
in
until
mind.
then. Well, we've talked about the heavier weight, so how about we go down the scale? Iván Calderón, a lighter fighter, getting his due. Does he deserve it? When we come back. Welcome back into Deep Waters. You see right there, Iván Calderón. That's right, from Puerto Rico. The light fighters, do they get their due? Do they get enough justice? Chris, we don't have the knockouts, right? We don't have the size of the heavyweights. We don't have the names. But this was a great fighter in his prime, had all the skills, but fought below flyweight. Is it hard to give him his due?
No, not at all. This is crazy. This is even a discussion. This guy, I'm going back to the book.
When Chris goes to the book, it's a big deal.
11 defenses at minimum weight, 6 defenses at light fly, 2 division world champion, a total of 21 world title fights, 18-3. Come on. I mean, he wasn't a knockout puncher. Yes, he's a small guy, but he was like the original small guy to be that dominant. So someone to be that dominant for that long in 2 different weight classes, no question. Yeah, Showtime, that ability to win at that weight class where you need to be able to do everything. These aren't slow, plodding guys. You got to be able to do everything. You got to be able to do it for 12 rounds. What's your thought on him getting into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I mean, just like Chris just said, a classic small man that's got it all, the speed, the work rate, the IQ, as well as the motor, which seems to be one of the more necessary things at that lightweight. The move had offense, defense, the whole nine. That southpaw stance as well. Definitely, I think helped served him well in terms of how he was able to fight guys. A lot of guys that were much bigger than him as well, and he was able to conquer most of them.
You know, there are times when guys get in, Paulie, and they don't have the full skill set. We talk about Ricky Hatton being kind of a limited boxer. Calderón was not a limited boxer. He could do it all: slip punches, return, excellent offense, defense, footwork. What's your thought on his skill set and what that means for getting into the Hall of Fame?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Iron Boy was a guy who, you know, it was in weight classes with those really small guys. It's hard to really get your name out there if you're not a big puncher. If you look at the most famous flyweights, they're typically big punchers, especially the older generation. Yeah. Now we're getting the flyweights are getting some more love. A lot of the champions are getting more shine and more love and getting TV time and getting more fame in those small weight classes. But back in the day, I mean, to get shine and to become champion and get shine in those weight classes is one thing to become champion, but to get shine in those weight classes, especially in the Western Hemisphere, the only guys you're really thinking about are Ricardo Lopez, Michael Carbajal, and Chiquita Gonzalez. I mean, that's it. I mean, there was so many other champions. And when you think about it, was still a three-belt era back in the day. Most of the guys are from Asia. They never really made a dent in the North American scene in the Western Hemisphere. I'm sure there was very solid fighters. But to be able to make that dent, to be able to, you know, create that dynamic, I wouldn't say must see, but that dynamic curiosity about you. You know, Iron Boy was a guy people were curious about because he was such a master boxer and he was beating these guys who were punchers, beating these guys who were dangerous. And he lasted a while not being a puncher. He had a long prime at a small weight class where typically your primes are small or shorter without being a puncher. He was also an Olympian. And of course, I got a personal bias because he has some New York roots as well. You know, Iron Boy was in the amateurs in New York. He was in the Bronx. You know, he won the New York Golden Gloves before moving back to Puerto Rico. So Iron Boy did it in the Iván Calderón did it in the amateurs and the pros.
Well, that's the thing. Great transition, champs. We're going to discuss what it takes to get into the Hall of Fame, and are we emotional about our picks, and should we be when it comes to who's the best of all time when we come back? Welcome back into Deep Waters. We're discussing the Hall of Fame class 2024. One thing we haven't really touched on is what is the criteria? What do we look at when deciding on who belongs in the Hall of Fame? The problem is you've been in boxing your whole life. You've been in combat sports. It can be a very emotional decision. Chris, is it the belts? Is it the skill set? Is it the greatness? Is it the wow factor of their fight standing out to you? What are the criteria for you for the Hall of Fame?
Well, listen, first of all, it's going to be objective. What was your accomplishments? What have you done? What are the numbers? Every other sport goes by objective numbers, right? If you talk about baseball, talk about basketball, talk about American football, it's about what have you done? How many championships have you won? How many games, this or this and that, depending on how you ended. But this is boxing, and there is a subjective nature to scoring. So you got to have a subjective part to it as well. So objectively, what have you accomplished? What have you done? What kind of titles have you won? How many defenses have you had? All these kinds of things. Two, what kind of fights have you had? Who did you beat? Well, that's more objective too, but like how much of an impact did you have on the sport? So I think it's a combination of the two. It's not just how many defenses and titles you won. It's also what you did to the sport on a whole, what kinds of fights you put on, what kind of memory you have lasting that matters when it comes to it. But I believe you have to have both. It cannot just be a gut feeling like, I like this guy, it can't be subjective. That's the guy, he had a big following, that's why he's going to be there. He's got to have the hardware as well.
Yeah, when we talked about Ricky Hatton, one thing that was brought up is what he meant for boxing in the UK. What did you do for boxing? Where you lived? How big did you make it? So I have a question for you. Start with you, Paulie. Of today's crop, there are a lot of fighters who are right on the bubble. We don't know if they'll be Hall of Famers. Now, their careers are they still have fights to go. But I'll throw out a name for you. I want to know what you think. Errol Spence Jr., do you think he gets into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think so. I think Errol was a long-standing welterweight champion, unified titles, was champion for a while, beat some very good fighters. I mean, again, you got to also keep in mind the standard of the Hall of Fame sort of diminishes if you let in the people on the cusp. Because then if you let certain people in on the cusp, now you create an argument. It creates a turbulent wave to where now you got to analyze everything throughout history. And you're saying, okay, well, man, maybe this guy deserves to get in, and also that guy deserves to get in. So when I see some of the names that have been let in, I mean, I think Errol Spence deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for sure. I mean, he's accomplished plenty, and he was one of the more exciting fighters of this era in the welterweight division. Does one loss to Terrence Crawford and the way he got dominated undo that? I mean, listen, Tim Bradley brought up the other day that Ernie Shavers is in the Hall of Fame. Jerry Quarry smoked Ernie Shavers in one round. You know, Jerry Quarry will never be in the Hall of Fame, right? So I mean, are we going to really count the Terrence Crawford loss against Errol to the point where we don't put him in the Hall of Fame? That's ridiculous.
Showtime, Anthony Joshua, heavyweight, kind of on the cusp to a lot of people. It's a good era of heavyweight. Do you think he'll get into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think he's definitely making a great case for himself in the way he's been performing his last 3-4 fights, maybe 3 or 4 fights now. He's certainly making a case to solidify himself as a Hall of Famer upon retirement. I think the fight a lot of us would need to see is the fight with Tyson Fury. I think that's the one that we never got. Of course, a fight with Deontay Wilder. Should he be successful? Once upon a time against Deontay Wilder, that fight is no more. I think maybe, if anything, one big fight away from being in the Hall of Fame.
Now, that's a good way to put it. Speaking of big fights, it might keep someone in or out of the Hall of Fame. Bivol versus Beterbiev. Chris, it's coming up. We were all excited about it. Would you add Hall of Fame entry into the stakes of this fight? Does the winner get in?
As of right now, neither one gets in. But a win over either one, and it becomes arguable. And probably Bivol, because Bivol's got the win over Canelo, upset victory. He's been undefeated. He beats Beterbiev, depending on what he does with the rest of his career, because it's still kind of early, even for Bivol. You know, he's not a young guy, but he still has a lot more to do in the sport. And I think he has a lot of fights left in him. Beterbiev is the opposite. He's at the end of his rope. You know, he's going to be 40 years old. He's actually having trouble getting to fights now. But a win over Bivol is massive, and there could be an argument for that. But in terms of what he's done up until this point, I don't think either one of them.
I'm gonna push back on that, Jim. I'm gonna push back on that. They're the best light heavyweights of this era. If you can't get into the Hall of Fame as the best in your era in a weight class, that means the entire weight class just wasn't good. It was a pretty solid era of light heavyweights we had.
Yeah, but neither one beat any Hall of Famers.
These guys are the best of that era.
But they didn't beat any Hall of Famers. They didn't beat, like, what are the name guys you're thinking of? Bivol's got the winner of Canelo. But
that's what I was going to say. The thing for Beterbiev, 100% is timing and opportunity. There was the timing of him with everyone else. He just beat. No one had a big name, and he hasn't had the right opportunity outside of Bivol to get a big name. You know what I mean? So some names, but nothing that jumps off of the screen to you. So, you know, for Beterbiev, it's timing and opportunity, and maybe even the same for Bivol.
Well, Paulie, say the fight never happens. Say Beterbiev can't get through a training camp anymore, and this is the end of his rope. Do you put him in the Hall of Fame?
I mean, he's one of the most destructive light heavyweights in history.
But does that get you in the Hall of Fame?
I mean, when I think about a guy like Ernie Shavers in the Hall of Fame, there's a lot of people that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
But look at all the guys that Ernie fought.
You can get me light heavyweights that are in the Hall of Fame, and I think Beterbiev knocks them out. Most of the light heavyweights in the Hall of Fame, I think Beterbiev knocks them out. Beterbiev in his prime knocks out most of the light heavyweights that are in the Hall of Fame.
I'm not going to argue that, but
Chris, one question I have. Guys that start their career comparatively late, and we're seeing that for these Eastern European fighters, 20 fights, 19 fights, no matter how good you were, should that warrant a Hall of Fame when guys have 50, 60 fights? What's your thought?
Yeah, I don't think that matters, because then you got to look at what they did in the amateurs. Like, you got to look at their career in totality. And Beterbiev has a lot of title defenses. He beat a lot of good fighters, but like Sean said, there's not any like name or breakout guys that really have. But the Bivol fight would be that. That's a tough one, because like you said, Champ, Beterbiev is that guy, but also you need a dance partner. It's
a debate that will continue forever. I hope we've enlightened you a little bit about 2024. The class that got in, do they deserve it? Do they not? Well, we made our arguments. You make yours in the comments section. That's what you do. Thank you so much for watching here at ProBox TV, and we'll see you next time.